Morning. Anybody not ready? Okay. So we're here this morning to announce the arrest of Stephen Urban, who is a 6-year Child Protection Investigation Division employee with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. As everybody should know by now, in 6 Florida counties, the state Department of Children and Families does not operate to conduct child welfare investigations. In those 6 counties, including Pinellas, the sheriff conducts those investigations in lieu of DCF. So whenever there's an allegation of abuse, abandonment, and neglect of a child, that investigation is done through the Child Protection Investigation Division of the Sheriff's Office. We've done that now for over 15 years, probably close to 20 years here in Pinellas County. We respond to somewhere around 11,000 calls a year where the allegation is abuse, abandonment, neglect of kids. We have 140 people employed in our Child Protection Investigation Division, with about 80 of those being child protection investigators. So that's a background and backdrop to what I'm going to tell you happened here. In January of this year, one of our child protection investigators was assigned to investigate an allegation that a child was in danger due to domestic violence that was occurring between the child's mother and another relative. The specific allegation was that somebody had thrown a knife and the child was in environmental harm because of what was happening in that household. That child protection investigator conducted a preliminary investigation and learned that there had been a prior similar allegation involving the same family in November of 2017, and that child protection investigator Steve Urban had investigated that case. The child protection investigator in January reviewed Urban's reports and case materials from those November allegations. When the investigator in the January case began interviewing people, she realized that there were discrepancies because when she asked those people about Urban's prior investigation, they denied being interviewed and they had no knowledge of this prior child protection investigation that had supposedly been conducted. Because of the specific details in Urban's file and the lack of any knowledge by people who had supposedly been interviewed, she became concerned that something was wrong and perhaps there had been some fabrication of the reports in Urban's file. She reported that to her supervisors. The supervisors began an investigation and they determined several people who Urban stated that he had interviewed, including a school counselor and the grandmother of the child, had not been interviewed, and it did appear that Urban fabricated the case file. In fact, the grandmother, who Urban wrote in a report that he interviewed in November of 2017, she had died 3 years earlier in 2014. Supervisors confronted Urban and he denied fabricating or falsifying any records and claimed that he actually did the work. When he was confronted by higher ranking supervisors, he began to mitigate and stated that he may have skirted some things but wouldn't fully come clean, and denied that there were complete fabrications of files. When we told Urban that we were beginning an internal affairs investigation, he resigned, and he resigned on January 18th of this year. We immediately began a review of all of Urban's cases for the past year, and the review covered the period of January 1, 2017 to January 17th of 2018. During that year period of time, Urban had been assigned to conduct 142 child protection investigations. We reviewed all 142 of those cases. And as a result of that review, we determined that Urban falsified records in 75 out of those 142 cases, or 52% of his total cases for that period had falsifications and fabrications. The remaining 67 cases, he did his job. The falsifications ranged from flat-out lies to misleading information and included statements that investigations had been conducted when no investigation had been conducted at all. In short, instead of doing his job and ensuring the safety of children, Urban made up case files and made up reports when he did no investigation of the alleged abuse, abandonment, or neglect of children. In 44 of the 75 falsified cases, Urban committed what is really the most egregious act that somebody in his position can commit when he documented that he personally saw children who were alleged victims of abuse, abandonment, or neglect and verified their well-being when he never even saw them and they had no idea as to their condition or to their jeopardy. In 29 of the 75 falsified cases, Urban did absolutely no field work whatsoever. That means in 29 of the cases, not only did he not see the kids, but he never lifted a finger other than to sit at his desk or sit at home on the couch or wherever he made up these stories and made up all these files and made up all these witness interviews and totally concocted these false narratives and these false stories about what he did. So in 29 of those, he did absolutely nothing. 72 of these cases required investigation and follow-up, and child protection investigators undertook that process over the last couple of months. These new investigations resulted in 2 cases where children were removed from their homes because the circumstances established present danger of risk to the children. One of the removal cases involved 2 children, ages 4 and 10. The mother was leaving the children unsupervised, and other factors established a necessity to remove the children from that environment and put them in foster care. The other removal case was one of medical neglect, where children ages 7, 8, and 10 were not being provided necessary medication by the parents. The mother in that case stated that she had 6 kids and it was too much work to take the kids to the doctor. So the kids had to be removed from that environment. I'm going to give you a few examples of cases where Urban fabricated the investigation, but our subsequent follow-up did not result in the children being removed. In August of 2017, Urban was assigned a complaint where he totally falsified records and did no investigation, where the allegations were the mother was using opiates and her roommates dealing drugs in the presence of a 3-year-old. The child was never seen, the parents never interviewed, and no action taken despite his reports to the contrary. In another case in December of 2017, the allegation was that a 9-year-old had suffered physical abuse. Urban entered false case notes in the case management system. He entered a false family function assessment. He entered a false child present danger assessment and false sworn statements from several witnesses. Another case in October where the allegation was domestic abuse. This again resulted in false case notes, false family function assessment, false child present danger assessment, a false supervisor consultation, and false sworn witness statements. So during the follow-up investigations of these cases, the children were deemed not to be in danger, and fortunately, in none of these cases did any children suffer harm because of Urban's gross misconduct. I just mentioned that last one. One of the false entries was regarding supervisor consultation or supervisor consultation notes. We have extensive checks and balances and protocols and policies in place, including a requirement that the child protection supervisor be briefed on every case and that the supervisors review case files. The reason why our processes did not catch Urban's actions is because he flat out lied. When briefing the supervisors, he made stuff up. And we have these checks and balances, we have these processes, we have these protocols, we have these policies to ensure that these investigations are properly done, are adequately done, and the safety of the children is ensured. But Urban had been around for 6 years. He knew what to do and how to do it, and he just flat out made it up and lied. So when he was standing in front of the supervisor talking about the case and briefing the supervisor on the case or entering the notes that the supervisor would review, to have that level of oversight, he was fabricating everything and just totally making it up. The supervisors did their jobs, and based upon our review, there's no way that they would have known, especially when you have sworn statements, you have the safety plans, you've got everything else that he was supposed to do in there, and it was all filled out, so it gave the appearance that he was doing it despite his blatant lies and the falsities that he was creating. So in looking at it, and it's really sad that it's come to this, but we have now implemented a policy where one of the child protection supervisors will pull 5 cases from child protection investigators on a weekly basis. And they will contact the witnesses and contact the family and contact people and ensure that the contact was actually made and the investigation was actually conducted, because it's imperative that we do everything we can to make sure that this never happens again. But when you have somebody that is a liar, a cheater, a scammer, and is manipulating the system, it's very difficult to detect it when everything appears on its face to be valid. But by implementing this additional level of scrutiny, where a supervisor has to contact somebody and confirm that they actually did communicate with the investigator, I hope that we're putting in an additional safeguard so that it never happens again. And as I said, it's a sad day when it comes to that, but when it comes to child welfare and making sure the kids are safe, you have to do absolutely everything possible. So Urban was arrested this morning at his home here in Largo on 10 felony charges of falsifying records. He refused to be interviewed and wouldn't make any statements to detectives. In the 10 cases that Urban is charged in, there are 40 false entries on 27 different dates. I mentioned to you that he worked here for 6 years. We've completed this review for the 2017 cases going back the last year. We're now beginning a review going back further, but we wanted to make sure that we got through the last year's worth of cases first. Those are the cases that we thought were most serious and that we needed to do something about to make sure those kids were not in harm, but we've begun a review going back for the previous 5 years. I can tell you that the people in the Child Protection Investigation Division at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office are flat out mad about this. It's very disturbing to them because they're professionals that come to work every single day to ensure that these kids are safe. And they've committed their professional lives to that, and they work hard. It's a very tough job. And to have somebody who works among them that is a liar, cheater, scammer, and manipulated the system because they just didn't want to do the work that they should have done is an affront to all of them, and they're upset about it. But I also can assure you that it's an anomaly and that the people we have working out there are doing the right thing. They're protecting the kids in this county, and that the processes and systems in place are sufficient. But when you have somebody that just flat out makes it up and lies and defeats the checks and the balances by doing that, unfortunately, this is what you end up with. But it worked, the system worked, and we were able to catch it ourselves and detect it and then take the necessary and appropriate action. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that happens, but Urban, again, has been arrested. He'll be transported to the Pinellas County Jail. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. When we get done here this morning, Urban is here, and they're getting ready to transport him, just so happens now. So when we get done here, if you all want, they're going to walk him out front, and you can take photographs or video or whatever you want of him leaving the building and going to the jail.
Sheriff, I mean, the 5, those are random because they may have more than 5 cases at a time. So it'll be 5, when you say they'll be reviewing 5 cases per month.
Well, yeah. So what we're going to do is that, no, we're going to look at, the child protection investigators, probably on average, each one of the 80 of them probably has somewhere around 15 open cases, 12 to 15 open cases at a time. But every single week, a supervisor is going to pull 5 every week, 5 random cases, go through those cases, and when they documented in a report that they interviewed so-and-so, the supervisor is going to call so-and-so and make sure that they actually interviewed them. If they say they went out to the house and they interviewed the family, then they're going to make sure that they did that. If they interviewed the kid, they're going to make sure that. So we're going to have a random review just to make sure that when they say they're doing these interviews and doing the investigations, that they're actually doing it. And, as I said, I think it's sad. that we have to do that, but I got to make sure this never happens again.
You know, right now, talk about timing, right? The
Yeah.
state is looking at adding more caseworkers into sheriff's offices around the state, millions of dollars being spent. And here you have a situation where people who are already on the job, hired to do the job, being paid to do the job, are not doing the job.
Yeah.
Is that just bad timing considering what we're considering doing right now?
Yeah, it's bad timing because this guy's an anomaly. I mean, I've never heard of anything like this before. Hopefully we never hear of anything like this again. This is just one of those situations that is unfortunate. You know, at any time that it happens, it's bad timing. I mean, there's a lot going on right now, you know, as far as child welfare is concerned. I know, you know, with things that are going on over in Hillsborough, things are going on really across the state. And all I can tell you is that I know that this is an anomaly. This is one guy. It's not representative of the work that's being done by our child protection investigators or any child protection investigator in the state. And sometimes you got a bad apple, and he's a bad apple.
So they do need more as opposed to people who are already here doing the job the way they're supposed to be doing.
Well, you're really talking about two different things, I think, is that, you know, child protection, so the work that we do and that the 5 other sheriff's offices do, we conduct the initial investigation into the allegation of abuse, abandonment, neglect. And we make a decision whether that child should stay in that environment with a family or should be removed, put with other family members, or put into the foster care system. Once we go through that process, and there are certain things we can do, like safety plans and other things if we leave the child in place. But once we go through our initial process, then we turn it over to what's called the CBC, or the community-based care provider, and that's Eckerd in this case. They're a contract provider. A lot of what you're hearing and a lot of what's being discussed isn't on our side, it's on the CBC side. Because we do the initial investigation, make the initial decisions, the initial determinations, and then we turn it over. So when after a kid's removed, or there's long-term staffing that's going to occur in services, that's not us. So the need and the call and the issues that are being addressed are on the CBC side, not on the investigative arm side.
But didn't they say that they would be working within the sheriff's department?
Well, that's different. You know, you're talking about there is that what the governor was calling for, that's a whole other thing. That's totally different than this. And when they're talking about embedding a caseworker from DCF in the sheriff's offices, that's totally different than this. That has to do with trying to identify people, especially young people, that have mental and behavioral health issues that are out in the community that may benefit from case management or navigation into services. That's apples and oranges from this.
What other checks and balances are in place besides what you just put into place, the new system,
Yeah.
that, you know, keep an eye on these folks and make sure they're doing their job?
So we have very close supervision in child protection. All of the investigators have an immediate supervisor. Our supervisor to investigator ratios are consistent with those recommended by the Child Welfare League of America. And then all of those supervisors are supervised by a law enforcement sergeant, and then there's a lieutenant and a captain. So it's a very, very tight span of control, and the supervision is very close and it's very active. There are measurements that are put in place to ensure that when investigations are received, that they're conducted within a very narrow window, and it depends upon the type. Some are immediate, where you have to go out right away. Some are within a period of time of hours. And then there are certain time frames for thresholds where things have to be done and evaluated and conducted. And they all have to be entered into the case management system within required intervals, and all of those have to be signed off on, and then there's various levels of review for everything that's done. And that was in place here. So as Urban was conducting these, he was meeting the time frames, not really because he's making it up. He knew what to do. He probably spent more time making this stuff up and fabricating it and lying about it and creating sworn statements and doing these safety plans and having to think up the facts than if he'd just gone out and done his job. And so there are a lot of layers, a lot of processes, a lot of systems, and active supervisory oversight where they have to meet with the supervisor reviews the file. But when somebody comes to you and brings you everything and it looks right, but it's all made up information, then you're going to have this type of situation. And thankfully, it is a complete anomaly. It just, you know, because most people get into this for the right reasons.
What was he making?
47,000.
And so, did you say that you've gone past, you've looked at 1 year, but not the 5 prior? So what are the chances that there was a child put in harm's way because of how he acted?
Well, I don't know. Certainly I hope that didn't happen, but we're going to look at it. But the ones that were crucial to look at were the last year, because those were kids that still could be in harm's way. And as we reviewed all of those cases, all 142 of them, we didn't find any child that had been harmed. We found 2 that were still in a situation where they should be removed, but that was it. Now, going back in a period of time, we're going to look at those. And a lot of these people, too, because of the nature of the allegations and, frankly, who some of these people are, we're not going to be able to find some of them. Some of them are going to be gone. When you're looking back 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, so we're going to look at it and see. And, of course, I hope that nothing bad happened to any kid because he didn't do his job. We all hope that.
Do you have any idea what he was doing, or was he just sitting at his desk? What would be the benefit to him to not do?
I don't know. He wouldn't answer the questions. And I could guess and I could speculate, but I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It appears on the surface that he might have been self-screening out cases that he thought. The way it works is that all the cases come in through a central reporting center, the hotline in Tallahassee. Tallahassee gets all the complaints, and then they funnel them down. So when we get those and we get the file, if you will, for investigation, the allegations that are there, he may have looked at some of those and dismissed them, or thought that they didn't warrant attention, or he could just cut corners on it because he's seen it before, that kind of stuff. That might be, but I want to stress to you that is something I'm just speculating about and guessing about. I really don't know, because he wouldn't tell us, and he wouldn't talk. What motivated him to do it? I don't know. But the concerning part, there's a lot concerning about it. Think about the concerted effort that he made with the safety plans and the sworn statements and the witness interviews and going through all of this to write all of this up and to make it up. He's telling a story. He's writing a fictional story because he didn't want to go do his job. I mean, there's a lot of thought that had to go into that, and he knew what he was doing. And this isn't just 1, 2, 3. This is over 70 of the cases that he made all this stuff up in. And sometimes he'd dabble and he might go out and do a couple things, and then he wouldn't do the rest of it. And then you got 20 plus where he did no field work whatsoever, and then a whole bunch, which I think is the worst of the worst, where he just didn't even put eyes on the kid who was the victim and was potentially a kid that was in jeopardy.
Do you have any remorse? I mean, it almost kind of sounds like he just at some point just stopped caring about the job that he's supposed to be doing.
Exactly, and for that, I wish he would answer our questions, but he wouldn't. As soon as the detectives made contact with him this morning, he said he wanted a lawyer and he didn't want to talk. And when we confronted him with it back in January, remember at first, oh, no, I'm doing my job. There's no issues, there's no problems. And then he was confronted by higher level people and as well, maybe I was skirting a few things here or there. And then he just walked in, tendered his resignation and left. So we didn't have, there was no opportunity beyond that. And he wouldn't talk to us.
What's his background? Like, did he have any child protection training prior to getting the job here at the sheriff's office?
Well, so no child protection training, but everybody who starts here goes through extensive training, and you have to sit for a state certification exam, and there's a whole process. You have to be state certified, so you get a lot of training for the job. He'd been here for 6 years. He's 29 years old, and from what I know, he didn't have any government, public sector work experience before that. He came from odd jobs in the private sector, from what I understand. So, came here fairly young, about 23 years old, and got into child protection, has been here for 6 years.
Like counselor,
No, in order to be a child protection investigator, you have to have a bachelor's degree. It's preferred that it be in a social service field, but it's not required, but you minimally have to have a bachelor's degree. And again, they go through a lot of training. It's called pre-service training. It's kind of like an academy, and then they go through a field training, and they go through a lot before they get on what we call full rotation, and they're getting cases on a regular basis. But he did this for a number of years, and there was nothing remarkable about his performance. He seemed to be just somebody who was doing his job. And the question is, which a couple of you have alluded to, is how long was this going on? And the answer is, I don't know. I know it was going on in 2017, and I know we had over 50% of his cases that he was falsifying. What's that number going back previously? I don't know the answer to that. And going back, we may never know the total answer to it, because as you go back in time, a lot of those people, they're going to be gone. We're not going to be able to get a hold of them. That's kind of the nature of who these allegations come in against. So. But we'll continue to look at it. The most important thing is it stopped, and that he's gone and he's criminally charged. And frankly, I hope that, and I don't usually weigh in on this, but I'm going to weigh in on it. This guy needs to go to prison. Is that he needs the harshest of consequences that anybody can get for his actions, because he put kids in harm's way when he's charged with making sure no harm comes to kids. And so he failed everybody. He failed the community, but he failed these kids. There's no room for that. And he needs to go to prison. He needs to pay for that. And there need to be harsh consequences for what he did. So if you all want to, anybody that cares to, they're going to be bringing him out here in a second. I think they're done with him now, done processing him here. So there's I think out the front door, there's a cruiser out there. I think they're going to be bringing them out to that. So anybody that cares to, you're welcome to go out there as they bring him out.
Those who want additional photos or video, follow us out.
Okay.